Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on The Private Life of Plants by Seung-U. This book is a love story. Now, it reaches its apogee in a series of fairy tales and shared dreams towards the end of the book that are thoroughly developed. They're these real gems. But it's a book that it's exploring love in all of its extremes. So the deepest, darkest consequences of sexual jealousy, of romantic jealousy, and how desire propels people to make impulsive decisions that just absolutely ruin lives. Their own, their partner's life, their family's lives. It's also a book that's exploring the other extreme, the idea that love can be a new dawn, that it's this new phase of life, and that one can be propelled from the lowest point of one's life forward into some new exciting phase where one feels connected, where the desperate connections one has hoped for get plugged in, tied up, and suddenly one feels anchored in life and can move forward and take a new step. So it's a book that's exploring these extremes. There's almost no middle ground for the characters in this novel. Now, all of these ideas around love are explored through an interesting voice. It's a narrator who is just absolutely incompetent as an adult. He's running this errand boy business called Bees and Ants because he can't really get a job doing anything else. So he essentially just runs errands. But he's been hired by a stranger to be a private investigator. And the person he has to investigate is his own mother. And so through that, he discovers things about her past. He discovers things about her interaction with his father, with his brother. And all of these ideas, these secrets around their family start to be explored and examined in detail throughout Lee's novel. And so that in itself is interesting. We have this totally incompetent narrator who periodically gets at these important ideas. But it's often that he's more a witness to someone else sharing the profound idea. And it creates this interesting tone. Now, I wanted to read a couple of passages just to give a sense of what the novel sounds like. Day by day, as my secret love for Seung-U grew, my hatred toward my brother also grew. I was delusional, holding tight to the belief that no man could be blamed for whom he loved. As opposed to hating someone, to love someone is honorable. And it is even more honorable to continue loving someone under impossible circumstances. I clung to this abstract ideal. Each love exists in a unique world of its own, where it is born, recognized, and experienced. For this reason, every love is special. But no love can exist in a vacuum. I failed to take heed of the circumstances surrounding my love. I purposely closed my eyes on them. But I soon discovered that new desires are born where truth is ignored. And he's plumbing at this idea. He's recalling these ideas around, well, how do I justify the fact that I fell in love with my brother's girlfriend and would essentially spy on them? I would sit outside the door while they were, privately talking. There's no sense that he was like a peeping Tom, but he would sit and want to listen to their conversations. He would go and find tapes that they had made. I think this is set, that part is set roughly in the 1990s. He would find these tapes that they had made and listen to them. The private tapes that were there, they're just recording their conversations, and then she'll periodically sing a song. And so he steals the tapes and listens to them over and over and over until the tapes have run through. Or he finds snapshots his brother has taken, because his brother's a photographer. And he looks at these snapshots of the brother's girlfriend who he's falling in love with, Seung-U. And so this is someone who has been a private investigator even as an adolescent and as a young adult. But that gets at the idea that he was violating so many people's privacy as of this private investigator. And now he's been hired to do the same thing for his mother. And so those ideas are explored in fairly clear detail. Another passage: I can imagine the dense forest behind the hedge, he had said. I can imagine the tall trees competing to possess the sky in the deep caves that must be somewhere out there. And I can imagine shrubs and wild grasses entwined with each other, and with the birds and insects and animals in the earth. And if I keep going deeper into the forest, maybe I would find a gigantic ash tree there, propping up the sky. I wonder if I would see all that if I went deeper and deeper into the forest. I always wanted to go further in. Once there, I would also want to become part of the forest. I would want to touch the huge ash tree that not only props up the sky, but also props up time. And so that's just a taste of the very exquisite metaphors that exist around plants and this deep erotic nature that plants can have. There are aspects where Lee's characters recall Greek and Roman myths where various characters were turned into plants out of love or out of grief at the loss of their love. And they try to place themselves in there of, are we trees that are going to be able to connect to each other and somehow be the grass and shrubs that entwine and connect as plants in this permanent love? Or are we rather these permanent statues to to our grief if we become plants? And that question hovers over many of the passages and many of the developments within the plot of this novel. Now, all of those ideas, every single one of those ideas, is framed by an opening that's outright provocative, because we are given our narrator, Ki-hyung, who is going around throughout Seoul, and that's another great parallel within the book, is that so much of the action is set in the cities of South Korea, yet we have all of these extended passages where the characters almost need to flee their life from the city to get into a forest or to go down to the coast and find a ridge where they can sort of see the ocean, the sea, in order to reach themselves and to reach their ideas and their true selves. But it's all framed at the opening with our narrator Ki-hyung going through the streets of Seoul to procure a woman to come back to a hotel room to spend the night with his brother. And the reason he does this is because his brother has lost both of his legs in a military accident, and has just been convalescing at home. And he wants to find someone to love his brother and to make love to his brother, because he feels bad. He feels responsible for this. And we found that early on, when he was hired to follow his mother, what he discovered was that his mother was going out on an errand with his brother, and then would carry his brother through like the streets into brothels, and that was not acceptable. But we also learn why his mother felt compelled to do that, why she would take this action for her son. And there's this idea that the narrator feels so humiliated and debased through all of this, and Leah's pushing this idea of like, should the reader feel this way? And that's a question that he never fully resolves. There's a great deal of ambiguity to many of the questions within this book, and I'm not sure if that is intentional, if it is an ambiguity due to the language and how opaque the motivations of many of the characters seem. But it's effective. It's a very effective novel, and it's interesting. Now, I read it with Quentin over at Idjit Reads and Rambles, so I'll be curious to see if he puts up a video. I think we both agreed it's a very emotional book. It really just keeps sort of like, pumping and pushing on someone's heart and impulses. But it is also very, very strange at times. Now, thinking of a couple of books, the one that really, the two, I should say, that really came to mind were Kafka on the Shore and A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami. Both of these feel somewhat surreal. They involve these elements of detection, particularly in Kafka on the Shore, where their idea are questions around sort of an almost incestual relationship, both with a narrator's, a young woman who could be the narrator's sister, and an adult woman who could be the narrator's mother. And that's fairly explicitly developed by Murakami and Kafka on the Shore. The absurdity of life's investigations are closer within A Wild Sheep Chase. But I'll link my video to Kafka on the Shore. As I had mentioned, there were fairly clear links, explicit links to some of the stories that Ovid writes about in the Metamorphoses. This is one of my all-time favorite books. I'd highly recommend it if you've never read it. And the fairy tales. I think these were closer to the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen, particularly works like The Little Mermaid. Fairy tales that seem sad, rather than fairy tales that are brief and these sort of like jolts of energy that we find in the Brothers Grimm. They're the more artificial, crafted tales that we find in Hans Christian Andersen. And I'll be curious to read more Asian folk tales and see if I see parallels that are explicit within those to what I was finding in Lee's novel. And then not so much the subject matter, but that ambiguous tone that was in The Private Life of Plants, I find also as well in the writings of Juan Rulfo, certainly Pedro Paramo, but also I would say his stories in The Burning Plain. So let me know if you've read this one. Let me know if you have a favorite South Korean writer. I'm trying to read different selections in the the Library of Korean Literature, the Dalkey Archive had published. So we'll see. This one I enjoyed quite a bit. So I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.